So today we have our last discussion before the exam, and we'll finish up with classical philosophy after Aristotle. Stoicism and Skepticism is what we will cover today, and as usual we'll have our little review somewhere along the way, but not at the beginning. We'll start by going right into Stoicism. So again, Stoicism developed roughly at the same time as Epicureanism, and first person who kind of gave this philosophy who created, you may say, this philosophy was Zeno of Citium. That's not, again, the same Zeno who had paradoxes. Again, just like with Diogenes, it was a very popular name, so plenty of people there in ancient Greece were called Zeno. Do not confuse them with each other. This is a different Zeno. He is a lot younger than Zeno with the paradoxes, who was dead already by then. He was born 336 BC, so he was still a little child when Aristotle already died. But roughly similar generation as Epicurus. However, the philosophy is different, and it is very interesting. It's especially interesting for us today because I have seen, actually, they mention in it, especially last March, when this whole pandemic thing happened, that Stoic philosophy is very helpful. The attitude, the Stoic attitude, the Stoic ideas definitely help people deal with all sorts of calamities in life. But it is rather complicated. We will only talk about it in general, not going to go into any detail. One of the reasons, since it's been around as active philosophy for about 500 years, from around 300 BC to around 200 AD, naturally there were a lot of varieties. The ideas which Zeno had at the beginning has been somewhat adjusted by the future leaders of that movement, and so to really understand it, you have to go through it very carefully and distinguish them. Plus, we actually don't know as much about what Zeno was teaching, because a lot of his work is lost, and we only know about his work from other people, so that is kind of complicated. But still, we can have a rather decent understanding, especially if we look at the later parts, Roman Stoics who were active several hundred years later, left a lot more in writing, and you can read Seneca, Cicero. They actually mention this philosophy, discuss it quite a bit. So we do know more about this later part of Stoicism than about the early part. Nonetheless, early part started around 306 BC or so, when Zeno decided to establish his own school, different from everything else. At first he was lecturing on the porch of an open colonnade in Athens. So this is this kind of a porch, and it really it's called stoa in Greek. The porch. The word stoa means porch. So something like this. This is where they were gathering. This is where they were discussing philosophy, and for this reason they are known as Stoics. That's where this name is derived from. Now, Zeno very clearly distinguished three divisions within philosophy: logic, physics, and ethics. And they later were describing it as, if you look at the human being, logic plays the same role as bones in the human body. So what do bones do? they hold us together, right? This is what the core of the body is. Now, physics, on the other hand, would be the body itself, all the muscles, all the veins, and so on. What about ethics? Ethics is the soul. It's the soul of a human being. So in a similar way, as you can distinguish this within the human body, you can distinguish this within the philosophy. And these three parts, according to them, are all very important. They try to work with them. They actually had quite a substantial contribution to logic. We will not talk much about their contributions to logic in this class because we actually don't deal with logic. But if you take Philosophy 102, all the propositional logic, these syllogisms, hypothetical syllogisms, for example, this is their contribution. Okay, so what about physics? What did they contribute to physics? And remember, physics, for ancient Greeks, coming from the word physis, that was generally just a science of what reality we see around us is made of. So what did they think it is made of? They very heavily relied on Heraclitus. Hopefully you guys still remember Heraclitus. We talked about him for good reason, because he was very influential, and among others he influenced the Stoics. So the Logos, who Heraclitus among others was talking about, and which played a very important role for Heraclitus, that Logos was also preserved by the Stoics. Another thing is fire, all permeating cosmic fire. They actually distinguish two types of fire: the cosmic fire and the fire which we have, which we see around us, which is kind of destructive. Cosmic fire is more positive, creative force. And the teleology, the purposefulness of the universe. Overall, that very, very beautiful idea. They thought that there is God, who they variously referred to as Zeus, nature, order. Zeus, among others, was the name they gave to God. And they kind of give this God a much more interesting role than most of the previous philosophers we saw. They thought that Zeus not only created the world, but Zeus is kind of part of the world itself. Zeus is that type of fire from which the world was created. So unlike the God of the Bible, for Stoics, God did not just create the world as a separate entity. You may say that the world emanated from God and it is part of God. God is in everything, and that fire which is in everything, that would be God. He is benevolent and just. And he is kind of diffused throughout the entire universe. Both God and human soul, for them also are material, just like for the Epicureans, but they are made of pneuma, a very fine material. Pneuma in Greek is actually a word for breath or wind, but they thought pneuma was more than that. In particular, they were saying pneuma was a mixture of fire and air. So that divine fire mixed with air gives pneuma. And it is literally in everything. So they thought that pneuma is in even inanimate objects, such as stones, sand, all that kind of stuff. And then it's called hexes. This is the pneuma in inanimate objects. It also is present in plants. Then it is physis. It also is present in animals, in which case it is higher type of pneuma. It is psyche. Remember, that's the word for the soul. But it also is present in humans, in addition to psyche, and then it is logos. So that logos, which Heraclitus was talking about, this is what is in particular distinguishes human beings. So again, remember, what does logos mean? Do you remember? So reason, that would be, yes, one of the best ways to. So discourse, that would be when people talk or think in words, but it also, again, remember, means reason. So it's not just any discourse, it is the rational content. So for this reason, what is present in humans, logos, which is present in humans, is not just our ability to talk anything, but our ability to reason. That reasoning ability, they thought, is what distinguishes us, and this is this most divine part of us. So in that sense, there is a little bit of connection with Aristotle too, and it is important to understand. So although the world is material, they also rejected this Epicurean idea of the world being made of atoms. They thought that doesn't make any sense. Again, all these arguments against atoms, they thought, work pretty well if they are of a particular size, whatever size that may be. How come you cannot divide it? You must be able to divide it. Then you will have two half atoms, and then you can divide that, and then you can divide that, and so on. So they thought that doesn't make any sense, therefore the word is a continuum. Continuum means it doesn't have any smallest parts. So in that sense, they sharply disagreed with Epicureans. It is one living body, and the logos is kind of like its soul. So this is when we're using our reasoning, we actually connect with that. So if we want to understand the world properly, the way for us to do it is by the use of our reasoning. They very sharply distinguish that from passion. Any kind of passion or feelings sways us from the correct course of action. You should not be swayed by the passions. The passions is what you should subdue. You, of course, as human being, will always have some sort of feelings and passions. It's impossible not to have them at all, but the less you have of them, the better. And in that case, again, they are kind of connected to cynics. So cynics did kind of influence Zeno. In particular, Zeno, it is said that he came to Athens as a young man. He saw some of the cynics and heard about their ideas. So he also accepted part of it, at least this part, that indeed all this kind of emotional reaction to the world around you is what gets you in trouble. You should not react emotionally. On the contrary, you should use a reasoning. That is your divine part. They also thought that the world actually is absolutely determined. Everything that happens by necessity. Now that immediately raises the question, how does the freedom of the will then fit in? That's an eternal problem here. They did kind of struggle with it a little bit. They had different explanation. Whether they work or not, that's a big question. Nonetheless, they insisted that the world is absolutely determined by God. Nothing happens by chance, and so that's one of the reasons we should be able to accept everything. Since whatever happens, whatever it may be, happens by a reason. God decided that it has to be this way, and therefore we cannot question that. We cannot reject that. And when we try, that is just stupid. So a good example would be stuff like, when you drive, but actually the book starts talking about that chapter in the book, when you drive in traffic, right? And very heavy traffic, and you are late, and you are getting all mad, and you're like, oh, Jesus, look at these idiots, they can't drive. Now, Stoics would say that is when you are letting your passion get you into trouble. And if you continue, you may get into accident, and then it will be even slower, and you will also have to pay for repairs, and all sorts of other trouble will happen. So trouble breeds trouble. Now you have to understand that this is not up to you. You cannot change that. The traffic jam and even behavior of other drivers is just, part of reality. So you have to accept it. You have to relax and just be like, okay, well, that's how things are, then that's how things are. I will probably be late, so be it. I probably next time should leave a little bit earlier. That's it. There's nothing I can do about it. So we all kind of know that this is the right approach, right? But it is very difficult for us to do it. And Stoics thought that the virtuous person, the person who truly understands how the world operates, absolutely has to take this kind of attitude. Now, they also had some ideas about life after death. They kind of disagreed about that a little bit. So Cleanthes, in particular, one of the earlier Stoics, thought that all souls will persist after death. They will still be there in some form. But then Chrysippus, who was a later Stoic, disagreed with that and said, no, like just virtuous souls. Virtuous souls will still be there. Souls which are not virtuous are not going to persist. They will disperse in some way. Interesting question they raised is the problem of evil. That will be like very big in when we get to Christianity and to the way Christians were dealing with it. But note that there's an overlap. That's actually one thing you should remember. Stoic philosophy was very, very popular at the time of Christ. It was very popular up until about at least 200 AD, 200 our time. So not only when the Christ was alive, but for about 170 years after that, Stoics were there in the same time as Christians. And they were more or less interacting and discussing the same issues. And even kind of competing for popularity, because each one of them wanted to have more people join their religion or rather their teaching rather than the other one. So that actually influenced Christianity a lot, but it also had an effect on Stoicism. So how did they explain the problem of evil? Why is there evil in the world? Because what is the problem of evil? If God is all-powerful and God is everywhere, and remember their God is actually benevolent and good, why is there evil? These questions has been raised throughout human history, but Stoics addressed it. So they had two types of solution to this, which they proposed. One solution is the world only appears evil from our perspective. If we could see cosmos as a whole, if we could have this kind of God's point of view on reality, we would understand that it is perfect, beautiful, and good. And the other kind of explanation is evil is a necessary means for realizing the good. This will become more prominent for the Christians. In particular, St. Augustine will be saying that evil is kind of there in order for good to be realized. If there was no evil, there would be no good. Because think about it. If everything is good, then what is good? It's no longer good, right? It's just stuff. In order for it to be good, there has to be some sort of a opposite. Okay, so let's see what you guys think. Let's have our poll. Do you agree with Stoics that everything that happens serves a particular purpose? Okay, yes or no? Do you agree that everything that happens has a particular purpose? 10 people say yes, 2 people say no. That is kind of interesting because, well, first let's deal with people who say yes, and let's see how then do you explain that there are really bad things happening? What's your position on that? For example, like there's serial killers who torture all sorts of people. So if everything that happens serves a purpose, what's the purpose of that? What's the purpose of them murdering people? Change their mind. Okay, that's fine. People who didn't change their mind. What do you guys think? Because that's the problem of evil in a nutshell, right? I mean, I guess we can agree with Stoics, their first explanation that if volcano erupts, and then even if it kills some people, you can say, well, that's unfortunate, but I mean, you know, that's nature. Volcano erupted, nothing we can do about that. Similarly, in animal kingdom, when a lion hunts a smaller animal and eats that smaller animal, we can say, from our point of view, it's kind of bad thing, right? He kills the innocent deer or whatever. But the defense would again be that that's part of nature. That's how they feed themselves. In nature, that's what is going on. But when you look at human beings especially, and you know, all this, there's some people who do such evil things, like seriously evil things for no purpose whatsoever, it seems, other than some sort of sick, twisted self-gratification. Can you say that actually is somehow also fits into that picture of the nature? Personal fulfillment. Well, again, looking at serial killers, what kind of personal fulfillment is that? Oh, but with this particular example, right, Melissa, look at, so you saying that some sort of child molester who molested children did that so that we could introduce the new law and protect children? That seems kind of a very weird way to look at it. I'm sure they do, but remember, if there's God and the God is all-powerful, he's not interfering with that? What kind of God is that? Why would he not interfere with that? That's the classic problem of theology, to explain evil done by this kind of people. When you have an all-powerful God who is also absolutely good, just basically take this kind of laid-back attitude and let people do these absolutely horrendous evil things. So anyway, the traditional explanation is that that kind of is what is necessary in order for us to have a free choice between good and evil, right? If God was interfering, preventing us from doing evil, then we would not have a free choice. That would no longer be a free choice. Then we would just be good because God forces us to be good, right? But the explanation, the traditional Christian explanation of that is that God lets us choose freely, and since we can choose freely, we can do tremendously evil things. And the fact that majority of us can do it but don't do it, that's what makes our choice indeed praiseworthy. Because you can never say that something is praiseworthy if somebody is forced to choose it, right? If somebody has no choice, if somebody has to be good because otherwise, God just ties his hands or something, then what exactly is the praise here? Why would you praise somebody for being good if he has no choice but being good? So this is more or less an explanation. Okay, so Abba thinks not everything has a purpose. Well, that's another way to look at it. Well, if somebody is a good person, lives in poor environment and suffering an illness, this is exactly where Stoics would say, well, that actually does have a purpose. And in fact, it's not a bad thing at all. The only reason you think it's a bad thing is because you don't understand the purpose there. But there is a purpose. So that's an interesting take the Stoics had on the subject. So again, they did contribute to logic quite a bit. Just a couple of words about it. They actually made distinction between dialectic and rhetoric. And remember, rhetoric is when you're making kind of these speeches, longer speeches, and dialectic is what Socrates was doing essentially. It is when you get to the truth through question and answer. And according to Plato and according to, I guess, Socrates, at least the way Plato portrays him, dialectic is a good thing. Dialectic is how you get to the truth, but rhetoric is not very good. Why? Well, because this kind of public speeches can be twisted any way people want. So sophists were using them just to basically convince people and get whatever they want for their own personal reasons. But Stoics actually kind of rejected that, and they said that rhetoric, when it's properly done, can also be serving the good. You can have speeches, longer speeches prepared in order to convince people about the truth, about something which is true. And in that case, that would be proper rhetoric. Otherwise, it would be just sophisms. They also worked a lot on theory of a definition, like how do we define words. And again, that's more of a philosophy 102. If you take philosophy 102, it goes usually, at least it should go into definitions. How do we determine what is the meaning of words? And that's why, because in order for you to be able to use logic, in order for you to be able to even have an argument about something, you have to determine what it is you're talking about. How do you delineate that? And then, like I said, propositional logic. But again, that's in this class, it's probably doesn't make much sense to talk about it unless you already took 102. You wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. Okay, now ethics is probably the most interesting and important part of the Stoic philosophy. So their ethics again was very closely connected to this ethics of resignation which Cynics had. Highest good in life is still eudaimonia. Remember the happiness. But remember what eudaimonia in Greek is not exactly like happiness. It's just more or less good life. The life which you can be happy about. And Stoics thought that eudaimonia can only be achieved if you are free from passion. Completely, or at least as free as you possibly can, because nobody's perfect. So don't let your emotion control you. This is a pretty good quote. It's actually from one of the Roman Stoics, Epictetus, but it is so good that we can go through it. Suppose a dog to be tied to a wagon, he was saying. If he wishes to follow, the wagon pulls him and he follows. So at his own power and necessity unite. But if he does not wish to follow, he will be compelled to anyhow. The same is the case with mankind. Even if they do not wish to follow, they will be absolutely forced to enter into the fated event. So note, for example, again going back to this example of being stuck in traffic, if you don't wish to be stuck in traffic, is there anything you can do? Can you somehow magically make the traffic disappear? No. This is reality. This is what is not under your control. So you again can, just like this dog tied to a wagon, you can take these two attitudes. You can either follow along with it and say, okay, I'm stuck in traffic, that's bad, but I'll just relax. And I'll be sitting here in traffic, and then when the cars start moving, then I'll be moving. Or you can take this other stupid attitude when you'll be like resisting this and going, oh my God, Jesus, this is so annoying. I will kill somebody now or whatever. And then you will be like that dog which doesn't want to follow the wagon, but it dragged to anyway. And then, of course, it's hurt and, probably has all sorts of problems as a result because there's nothing a dog can do. So this is I guess, the most important idea of the Stoic ethics. They also thought that they tried to kind of put together this idea of everything being determined and us nonetheless having some sort of freedom of the will. So as long as we act on the basis of logical thought, we are free. Now, what it exactly means and how it can be explained better, we will talk more about later in this class, because it actually comes back, especially Hegel had pretty good examples and explanation about this type of freedom as realized necessity. So what does the freedom as realized necessity mean? Like I said, it's a little too complicated at the moment. Let's not worry about it too much. But the idea is that we still have some choice. However, the choice we have to make is the correct choice to follow along with this reality and not to resist it. And all the moral evil, they say, is the result of our passion, which again you can kind of see where it's coming about. Say serial killers and stuff, do they actually follow their reason? Well, very clearly not, right? They follow some sort of passion, some sort of sexual deviation or whatever other deviation they have, which would not be reasonable by any means. It would just be some sort of unnatural and abnormal kind of attitude. So passion, as much as you can, should be eliminated. Then Chrysippus, for example, was distinguishing 4 kinds of emotions. So he would say pleasure, desire, grief, and fear, this is all emotions we always have. What do they actually mean according to him? Well, pleasure is a present good. We think that something, what we have right now, is a good, and so it is pleasure, which is, according to him again, mistaken. Desire is a future good. So you are hoping for having some sort of good in the future, and that's what desire is. Grief is a present evil. Something bad is happening right now, so you're grieving it. And fear is a future evil. So again, it's not there yet, but you're afraid of it because you're thinking that it will happen. To experience these sorts of emotion towards the event in my life is irrational. Why is it irrational? Well, because again, things happen because they have to happen. So you should not let yourself be steered up by them. You should just use your reason and find your way towards, again, virtue, arete. Virtue and arete, that is the most important part in life. So you should take this kind of attitude of apathy. What is it? Freedom of passion, accepting the reality. Everything that happens happens because it has to. And even death, in that sense, is not evil because it's natural. Again, it happens because it has to happen. And even though it may seem to us like, from our human perspective, that this is something bad, but from, again, this divine perspective, from the perspective of divine logos, it's not bad. It's necessary, because imagine if all human beings were living eternally. Well, there would be so many of us, right? Like bazillion of people. Where would they all live? We already have trouble with number of people we have today. There's not enough food. We produce too much CO2, and then the atmosphere starting to get corrupt, and global warming and all that stuff. Well, imagine if there were even more people, and they would be all consuming these resources and so on. The planet just wouldn't handle it, right? So when you think about your life, of course, none of us wants to die, but when you think about it from this kind of divine perspective, well, it's necessary that people die. They have to die at some point. It's completely inevitable. They were also saying that there are certain types of things which are, they call indifference. What are the indifference? It may be difficult for us to accept, but they thought even things such as health, pleasure, beauty, wealth, desire are all indifference. pain, ugliness, and poverty are also indifference. So a virtuous person, a person who truly understands reality, should not care about any of these things, including health. Why? Well, because diseases happen, again, because it's a natural part of reality. And there's pretty much nothing you can do to avoid that. Even though you may try to keep yourself healthy, and you by all means should exercise, healthy lifestyle, avoid the bad food and so on. But nonetheless, even if you do that, it's inevitable that you will get sick at some point. And you certainly should be able to accept it as, again, part of this natural process. But it may seem like if they're completely indifferent, then you shouldn't care about that at all. No, well, later on, especially with the Roman Stoics, they have distinguished among those indifferents. They said that some of them are preferences or advantages. So even though you should not worry about them and should not let your passion steer you too much, but of course it's better to be healthy than sick. Of course it's better to experience pleasure than pain, and so on. So essentially, like, they did kind of allow for this more common sense type of attitude, because there was some criticism, I mean, especially from Epicureans. And remember, Epicureans were there at the same time. They coexisted, and they were also kind of competing for new members. And so Epicureans were criticizing them for saying, well, that's not realistic. Who seriously can completely not care about being sick or being poor? Nobody wants to be sick and poor. So then in response to that, Stoics said, well, okay, it's preferable for you, of course, to be healthy and wealthy. It's just not that important, so you should forget about reason and forget about the more important parts of life. And another interesting part of their philosophy, they were cosmopolitan. That's also why, I don't know if you guys remember, I mentioned that they had a rather significant influence on liberalism, on modern Western thought. Why? Well, this cosmopolitan idea. They thought all people essentially are brothers and sisters. They're all part of the humanity. And as such, they should not be fighting over the fact that they're different nationality or different color of the skin or whatever other differences they have. So that idea goes back all the way to Stoic philosophy. We all part of this divine universe, right? We all have this divine logos in us. And so for this reason, we are all essentially the same thing. Now, Epicureans thought that, remember, people should not interfere in politics because politics kind of is bad and it steers you up unnecessarily. But Stoics, unlike that, actually emphasized our civic duties. And again, especially Roman Stoics. And for this reason, in Rome, later in the Roman Republic, the Stoic philosophy was a lot more popular. There are several Roman Stoics we can mention. I already mentioned Cicero, who was a Roman lawyer. He lived 106 to 43 BC, left quite a lot of work. Then Seneca, that is one of Emperor Nero's ministers. He already lived around Christ's time, from 4 to 65 AD. Epictetus, who was a former slave, and then he actually was liberated and he became philosopher. And finally, even one emperor, Marcus Aurelius, he was emperor of Rome, and he was also Stoic. So in Rome, Stoicism was quite popular. One other thing about their contribution, especially in that later Roman period, natural law theory. We will see it again. So what is the natural law theory? That's the theory that some of these moral laws actually are not nomos. Remember what nomos is. Nomos is the human invention. But from this perspective, moral law is actually part of physis. It is natural law. It is not something human beings introduce themselves. So the laws such as you shall not kill, why would that be part of the natural law? Well, again, if you think about it from that perspective, if we all have this part of divine in us, wouldn't killing another person mean essentially killing God? Because that other person also has part of God in him. And you kill that person, so you kill God. Naturally, that seems going against nature, going against those laws which are not up to us to decide. So this is kind of very important idea. And ethics of duty, the civic duty, the idea that as human beings we should not just serve our own entertainment or pleasure, the way it seems like it was again with Epicureans. So even though they did not think that we should go after things such as promiscuous sex and elaborate food, but they still thought that what we do in order to please ourselves, right? That's the goal there. Stoics, on the other hand, emphasize civic duty. In particular, the Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, was saying in his work, and he wrote some books, have I done something for general interest? Well, then I have my reward. So having done something for other people is a reward in itself. And he was also, again, in line with this cosmopolitan idea, was saying, but my nature is rational and social, and my city and country, so far as I am Antonius, is Rome, but so far as I am a man, it is the world. So again, even though I am Roman, I cannot distinguish myself from people from other countries, because they also are all human beings. We are all human beings. You shouldn't think of yourself as somehow superior just because you are Roman or an American or Japanese or Russian or whatever it is that may be. And like I said, it had a rather significant influence on Christianity. This Stoic outlook, the idea that you should not be steered by this kind of calamities such as pain. If you look at the figure of Christ in particular, well, there's quite a bit of Stoic outlook right there, right? He persisted in his faith despite being crucified. Now, that definitely sounds like something Stoic would say is praiseworthy behavior. Okay, so let's now go back and refresh a few things for the exam on stuff we covered last time. That is the part which can help you and also give you extra credit again, which will be very useful at the end of the class. So first question, suppose this is on the exam. This is from the review once again. So what opposition did the Cynics emphasize? Remember the Cynics. What opposition? What was the opposition there? Anyone? I'm a little worried about how you guys are preparing for the exam, which is on Monday. Well, that's one of the important things about them, but they did actually emphasize a position which we talked about last time very specifically, and I even mentioned a little bit about that today, even though I did not mention Cynics, but the opposition itself I did name just like a couple of slides ago. Nomos and physis, remember? So that's what they emphasize. Some things are physis by nature, some things are nomos, human invention. You should follow physis. You should disregard nomos, human invention. So that's the answer to this first question. Okay, who was the famous cynic searching for an honest man with a lantern? Remember? Okay, now that was easier. Looks like I'm afraid I will mispronounce your name. Alemtasei. I hope it's good. Yeah, got it first. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Diogenes was that person. Right. How is Epicurus different from Democritus? I actually misspelled it. How is Epicurus different from Democritus? That's a more difficult question, but it's good to refresh it for the exam too. How was he different? So, for one thing, you should remember, how are they similar? What is the similarity? Why do we even put these names together? Epicurus and Democritus. What was special about Democritus? You must have forgotten about Democritus already. Remember, his most important contribution was atomism, atoms, the idea of the atoms. And this is where Epicurus got this idea, atoms and the void. But what is the difference? Atoms and the void. Both of them were atomists. Both of them accepted the void, but the difference was... Okay, I guess you don't remember. So the difference is when they tried to explain freedom of the will. Now, Democritus actually was determinist. He thought there's no freedom because the atoms cannot deviate. They follow the laws of nature. But Epicurus was explaining freedom of the will by saying, no, atoms sometimes can randomly deviate from their patterns. And so for this reason, he explained the freedom of the will. And we had a discussion about that. So this is the important difference. Atoms can spontaneously deviate from their paths. Okay, what would Epicurus say our desire for sex and delicious food can be classified as? That should be an easy one. What would he classify? Remember his classification of desires? So food and delicious, sex and delicious food. There's a little bit of a better way to put it. An essential and... It is an essential, but natural. It's unessential, but it is natural. It's natural for us to want sex. It's natural for us to want delicious food. But it's unnecessary. So remember, he had some things which were natural, some things which were unnatural. And natural things are some of them necessary, some of them unnecessary. So that's how he classified things. Okay, why according to Epicurus should we not fear death? Again, that should be easy too, hopefully. Death makes life enjoyable? I don't know about that. No, he actually had an explanation. Remember, he had a saying there. Okay, so he was saying we shouldn't fear it because when we are there, death is not there. And when death comes, we are not going to be there to see it. That's his explanation. So we never actually meet death. They're saying when death comes, we are no longer there. That is the explanation. Death is nothing to us, I guess, would work too as an answer, but the idea is that it is nothing to us because we will never actually be there to see it. We can only see things while we're still alive and experience things. So we will never experience that. Okay, so this is the review for the last time. So we have still skepticism to cover. Skepticism is also very interesting. It could actually be even a good subject for a separate lecture, but I don't know like how deeply we should go into that. Of course, it's a word you hear even today, but the actual meaning of the word skeptikos is different from what we typically understand. We typically think somebody is a skeptic when he kind of doesn't believe into anything, questions everything, which is partly true. This is what they were doing, but the original meaning is the inquirer, the person who investigates things. And this is how skeptics thought of themselves, people who investigate things, and they thought that if you are honest with yourself, when you investigate things. You will discover that basically you do not know anything. That true knowledge is not something you can obtain. Okay, one of the first who kind of was behind this is Pyrrho of Elis. He lived 360 to 270, so he was kind of contemporary of even Aristotle, and even though lived much longer than Aristotle. We don't know that much about him, but from what we know from other people about his teachings, he seemed to be behind this whole idea of apathy and indifference, which is possibly also why it influenced later on the Stoics and became so popular. So he would say that anytime you experience something, you don't know whether what you experience is true or not. So for example, if you eat honey and it seems sweet, well, you don't really know whether it's sweet or not. You just have this kind of personal impression. So instead of saying honey is sweet, you should always say honey appears sweet to me. And similarly in all other judgments, because you really don't know whether anything you think is taking place is taking place. So the best attitude in life based on that would be this kind of apathy and indifference, in that even including the moral judgments, because in morality, when we say something is good or bad, we again are kind of like making this personal judgments about matters which we don't really know very well. So the honest position would be not to make them, to be indifferent about them, and even to be indifferent about things which happen to you, because again, you don't really even know whether they are in fact happening. Maybe, well, again, remember, the typical skeptical attitude could be illustrated with this movie's The Matrix, when you don't even know if you really are taking part in some sort of reality, or whether you are swimming in some sort of liquid and there are stuff attached to your head and feeding this signal. So that, even though they were not put in it this way, but this is where this idea comes from. How do you even know that you're sitting right now in front of the computer and listening to me? Well, you have like a good reason to suspect that, because it's what your eyes are telling you and other senses. But what if they're lying to you? What if this is not really happening? So the skeptics kind of take off from this and say, no, we can never truly know anything. Now, academic skeptics later on took part in Plato's academy. Plato, after Plato died, remember, his nephew succeeded him. After his nephew, quite a bit later actually, another person whose name is Archelaus succeeded, and he was one of the first skeptics, one of the first people who had this kind of skeptical attitude. It may seem strange to you that Plato's academy would be pursuing this kind of skeptical attitude. But, well, for one thing, remember, where did even Plato start from? Who inspired Plato? Who was Plato's teacher? Socrates. What was Socrates saying? What is his famous saying? Remember, he was saying that he knows only one thing, but he does not know anything. And he was saying that he is the wisest because other people also don't know anything and they don't even know that. So hopefully now you can see where even Plato's academy, going back to these Socratic roots, could essentially find the same attitude. So yes, if you look at what Socrates was saying, we don't know anything. And we really cannot claim this knowledge of reality in any sense. Also, even looking at Plato's work itself, like the famous dialogue Timaeus, which talks about the creation of the world and so on, can again be read as just a myth, just an attempt to explain unfamiliar in terms of familiar. And so for this reason, again, those academic skeptics were saying you can, in a similar way, understand the entire work of Plato, that this is just like one likely story, but you can never claim that this is the truth, because you don't know the truth. Nobody knows the truth. How do you know how the world was created? How do you know any of these other things about the good, the form of the good, and so on? You don't. So even though that cannot stop you from, saying all these things like your best guess at what reality is, but the honest attitude would be still that you cannot be sure. You cannot be sure this is how things really are. So later on, academics continued down that path, and later on they were kind of attacked by the other teachings, representatives of Epicureans and Stoics, and they themselves accused Epicureans and Stoics of being dogmatic. What does it mean to be dogmatic? Well, you kind of think that this explanation which you have is the true one, when in fact you don't have any firm foundation for this. So they were saying that when Epicureans and Stoics have this elaborate theory about how everything works, logos and whatnot, they are just making a mistake, because they've been dogmatic by trying to explain things which they do not know. So what is an arche? Remember what arche was. Again, that's word which we kind of started from. What is the arche? So the principle which, the beginning of everything, the most fundamental principle. So they asserted that we cannot possibly have knowledge of that. So every time you try to suggest something is an arche, you're guessing. You're presenting your best guess. And note that this actually is kind of confirmed by this entire history of philosophy up to this point, which you can see, because different philosophers had these different ideas. So this is kind of an honest approach to say, well, that's just one of the versions, basically. Now, later academy moved even more towards this nothing can be known position, and they were criticized for this because some of the skeptics at the time, some of the skeptics who were kind of trying to be true to Pyrrhonian position, were saying, well, that itself is also a mistake. By itself it is dogmatic position. Why is it a dogmatic position to say that you cannot know anything? That nothing can be known. What do you think? Why would it be dogmatic? Because note that it actually also affirms something. It affirms the fact that nothing can be known. And so the question here can be asked, why do you think nothing can be known? If you are saying that nothing can be known, you already are affirming something here. So they would go even further than that and say, nothing can be known, even the fact that nothing can be known cannot be known. So note that it also kind of rejects Socrates there. And when Socrates was saying, I know one thing, and this is what I don't know anything, yes, this new Pyrrhonian skeptics were saying, no, you don't. You don't know that either. So the honest position is, I don't know anything, and I don't even know that I don't know anything. Because that is the truly skeptical position. Otherwise, yes, you are creating this contradiction, which Plato also, by the way, mentioned before, that once you start affirming the fact that nothing can be known, you actually are saying that at least one thing true, the fact that nothing can be known. And then the question is, well, how do you know it's true? What are you basing that on? Do you have any kind of evidence for that? No. This is dogmatism. That's why. That's again one example of the dogmatism. Okay, can you live without certainty? Can you live this kind of with this skeptical approach? And will it make you happy? What do you guys think? Why would it make you happy? Do you think it could make you happy? Would it bring you some sort of happiness? Okay, Marcia doesn't think so. Does anybody can see why that approach can kind of bring you happiness? Yes, well, one reason which they actually, the way they explained it, and it does a little bit make sense. Imagine, think about it in this way. So suppose the reality really is just this kind of a virtual game. Suppose that the true you is indeed like in this matrix type thing, in some sort of parallel reality. Doesn't it mean that whatever happens in this world doesn't really affect you? That it has no consequence? So if you kind of believe that, wouldn't it make your life easier? So suppose something bad happens, right? Well, I don't want to suggest anything, but even like with this pandemic and stuff, we've taken it very seriously, obviously, because we sure that we are indeed living this life and this is indeed happening. But what they would say is, suppose that it's not really even happening. Suppose it's all kind of an illusion, this virtual reality world. Suppose that after you die, you actually wake up somewhere in a room and everything is great. And it actually is real life there. And the life you thought was real is not really real. So wouldn't it make your life easier then? Like, take it easy. This is just a game. So that is their point. If you don't know whether things are really happening, they shouldn't really affect you very much. It's not really ignorance. It's just that the fact that there is a possibility these things are not really happening at all makes them kind of a movie. Like when you watch a movie, right? You can also be upset about whatever happens in a movie. But every once in a while, don't you kind of like pinch yourself and say to yourself, but it's just a movie. These people are actors. None of them died. They are fine. None of them is sick. They actually making millions of dollars to play in this movie. So while I am upset while I'm watching it, I kind of realize on some level that this is not reality. This is just a movie. So if you take this attitude towards life, you can also be a little bit happier by thinking, yeah, I mean, it looks bad. All these people are dying and all that stuff. But maybe it's all just a game. Maybe none of this is really happening. So that would be their explanation too. Like, unless you have absolute certainty that this reality is the only reality, and you don't, and none of us do, you really cannot be that upset about it. Because again, for all you know, after you die, you may just wake up in some parallel reality, perfectly fine, very healthy, and having many more successful years ahead of you. Anyway. Now, why is skepticism very significant? Among other things, again, this is the foundation of what you may say is critical thinking. So, what is fundamental about critical thinking? And again, if you take Philosophy 102, this is what this class is about. Don't take things at face value. Always question things. Always look at things deeper and try to, question them beyond the surface. On the surface, things may appear one way, but if you start digging deeper, you may find out that they actually are not as simple. It's like in some of these documentaries when they at first portray something in a certain way and you're thinking, oh, this is so bad, and then they kind of give you more facts, and as you learn these facts you kind of see it better and go, oh, wait a minute, it's not as simple as I thought at first. So almost everything in reality is actually kind of like that. If you start digging deeper, you find out that things are not simple, and then you understand it better, but then you also not as judgmental, because one of the reasons people are easily judgmental is they don't understand the reality of it. They don't understand all the nuances of what's going on in life. So skeptical attitude in particular does help us to get to the bottom of things, because again, the idea here is not that you should just not believe anything and be deliberately ignorant. The idea, remember the word skepticus, inquire. You should inquire deeper. If you see something and it appears black, try to figure out, is it really black? Or is there some other color in here? And trust me, you will find out what there is. And so on. So that, of course, is like very simple way to put it, but the idea is this. Don't just think that you know everything. None of us do. And in that sense, Socrates was absolutely right. We should always look deeper and always try to understand things deeper. Okay. Now let's do the last review, because since it is the last class before the exam, I do want you to have this last bunch of questions covered. So let's see if you got it from today's lecture. What was the Stoic view of emotion? The Stoic view of emotions. What was it? Not effective in making choices. Well, it's a little bit kind of vague. They're not effective, so are they good? Are they bad? Should we follow emotions? Should we not follow them? If they're not effective, doesn't mean that we should reject them. Yes, battle your desires. The best life is the one which is not controlled by emotions. So emotion, the less of emotion, the better. Okay. Now, how about what do the Stoics talk about when they refer to apathy? What is the apathy? Okay, so the answer is the being free from passion and accepting the fact that everything that happens is necessary. This is what apathy is. No, not lack of interest. Accepting the reality, which is necessary. It is in English when you say he is apathic, so he lacks interest. No, you are interested. You're just not swayed. Being interested and being swayed is different thing. Okay, now, what was the Stoic view of social philosophy? Remember what the Epicurean view of social philosophy was? That we should not get involved with politics. Now, how about Stoic view? Is it different? Remember, social philosophy is our interaction with other people, society. Most importantly, political issues. Yes, we should help one another. It is our duty to make our society better, to make our society mirror this rational universe. The universe is rational. The society sometimes is not. So we should actually make it more rational. Why was one group of skeptics called academic skeptics? That should be a rather easy answer. We just talked about it like literally minutes ago. They were related to Plato's Academy. This is the Plato's Academy. They were part of Plato's Academy. That is why. Remember? Okay, why did Pyrrhonian skeptics criticize the academic skeptics? Including, both of them kind of said that we do not know nothing. Yeah, the difference is that academic skeptics were actually saying that you know that you don't know nothing. And Pyrrhonian skeptics were saying, no, you don't even know that you do not know nothing. So even our beliefs themselves cannot be probable, because the belief that you do not know nothing is actually wrong belief. You can't have it. That already is too much. Anyway, okay, so on Monday, first exam, no class. remember guys, it doesn't look like you're ready. You should definitely pay more attention. If you missed some stuff, rewatch these lectures. This is no joke. This is 25% of the grade. It looks like most of you have no idea what you will be answering there. And trust me, the homework itself is not going to get you to a good grade. If you want to do well in class, you have to pay attention. You have to take notes. You have to know these answers. We have gone through everything. You should be able to answer everything correctly. If you don't, you have no one else to blame but yourself. This is still class. This is not some sort of entertainment show on Netflix. And so I do expect you to pay attention, and I do expect you to take notes. Okay, again, it will be open all day on Monday until 11:59 p.m. If you miss the deadline, do not miss it. If you miss it, you can still take it on Tuesday with 10% penalty. And no submission under any circumstances after 11:59 on Tuesday. Not even with the penalty. If you don't submit it at that point, then you just get 0. Remember, there's also reading for next Wednesday, chapter 8. We will start new material, medieval period. There's a lot of interesting stuff. Do homework for this chapter and do a quiz for this chapter, for chapter 7. They are as usual due on Sunday, so not only there is an exam, but there's still this homework and this quiz. You can do it today if you want, or maybe some of you already done it. Otherwise, that's it for the material before the first exam. I hope you guys are ready, or I hope you will prepare well. Otherwise, we are done for today. And I'll see you next Wednesday.